So if you've ever worked on a sort of low budget, open source, or personal Unreal Engine 5 project, you've probably noticed that it's really hard to get a ton of assets for aircraft. Okay, so when you go on the uh, Unreal Engine store, all these assets cost like at least $10 per plane typically. And then when you go to free, there's almost none. Okay, and the kind of the same story on CG Trader. There's a ton of paid assets, but when you get to free, maybe there's like 50 to 100 decent planes, but most of them are duplicates. And past the first few pages, most of them are just untextured or just random things like star destroyers and stuff. And so today I'm going to show you how to get hundreds of planes to put into your project completely for free. And yeah, and so if you just want to download the files, I basically have this on my GitHub and on Google Drive, where it's only about a gigabyte in a zip file with all of those basic files. But there's a lot of nuances to this, and especially if you want to do dynamic things with these aircraft. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll put the link to my GitHub in the description, which basically explains everything. But we're just going to go through all the steps, and then I'll show you some of the kind of issues and nuances of this. Okay, so the first thing that enables this is this software Flight Gear. So this is an open source flight simulator that's really cool, and I didn't actually know about it until just recently. And so it's completely open source, and so all of their planes are available for free online. By the way, make sure you're following this GNU General Public License, which is the license for Flight Gear. So this is open source, but obviously they do have some restrictions. So for example, you can't just take these assets and then just change them a little bit and then sell them like on the Unreal Store or something like that. I think the main restriction is that they want these assets to stay open source and available even if you modify them, and then potentially like even your software that you're using, if it's a derivative work, it would also need to be open source. So in my case, this simulation I'm making is probably going to be either open source or just sort of private. And so this shouldn't have any restrictions to me, but just keep that in mind. If you want to use it for some commercial game, maybe just ask your lawyer first. But yeah, with that being said, we'll just move on. But the problem is that all of these assets are configured for Flight Gear and for their kind of custom engine. So you can't just drop them in to Unreal as is. So as you can see here, when you go to the aircraft on their SourceForge, they have about just over 600 of these assets. Most of these are planes. Some of them are like cars or missiles and stuff. But for the most part, these are planes. And the main issue is that within each of these folders, they have different like hierarchies, and sometimes they have all these different types of planes within a single plane folder. Okay, and then even if you go into models, some of them have all these extra categories. Some planes will even include like their wings or the landing gear in here, and then they'll have just the basic models for several different planes in this folder. So it's sort of a challenge, but I was able to figure this out, and was able to automatically import something like 400 of these planes into my Unreal project, as you can see here. And for the most part, these assets look really good. You can see the F-35 here, the 787, and they have some major issues as well. Some of them get turned on their sides. A few of them become very tiny. As you can see with the 777 became super tiny for some reason. And then even a few of them became like super large, as you can see here with the A10. And that's basically just due to how the folders are constructed. But what I'm basically going to do is just delete just a few of those outliers. There's probably maybe like only 10 or 20 of those, and then use the rest in my Unreal project. Okay, so moving on, the first step that you're going to do if you want to do this, especially if you want to deal with the more in-depth aspects of this, is you want to just clone this entire repository onto your computer. And so this is like 40 gigabytes, so just keep that in mind. But all you need to do is just download SVN software, and you can just run this command in PowerShell with whatever flight path you have, and then this will just download all those assets. And by the way, this includes things like movable assets and exhaust from plane, contrails, all that kind of stuff. The next step, or the next problem, is that to convert these, we're going to be using Blender. And Blender doesn't use these AC3D files, which are kind of the specific files that Flightgear uses. And so you're going to need to add this add-on. So I have this linked on my GitHub, but you can just basically follow these instructions. And then I went with a version Blender 4.1.1 and then install this add-on and follow the rest of the instructions. What this is going to allow you to do is import these AC3D files into Blender. Okay, so you go here, File, Import .ac. Okay, and then you can go to your downloaded data. So here there's these 600 some planes that we have downloaded, and then you can just pick out the plane that you want and go to the models folder, and then you can load it in like this. Okay, and now in a lot of cases the .ac files will not include everything that's needed, like I mentioned, and so you're also going to want to include everything else that's in that model folder for it to properly load in. Okay, so something like here, left wing. Okay, so by default, this script that I made, it's going to basically load in all of those assets so you don't have to worry about it. The one downside to that, and by the way, you can just run any script over here in Blender, and you can just type in a Python script. Okay, but this Python script that I made, or I guess prompted, is this one, and this will include all those basic assets within the folder. It'll also imply the default texture that these planes have. Okay, so if we go back to Unreal, every AC file is going to have a default texture assigned to it, and that's going to change how the plane looks. Okay, so here I have as an example this Boeing 787, and it starts with this BOE texture, and this is just a PNG file. By the way, some of these were .rgb files, but that script is going to convert all those into PNGs so that they work with Blender and Unreal. And make sure you install that that pillow library, which I also put on my GitHub, to make sure that Blender can properly do that. Okay, but anyway, moving on, you can have these other what are called liveries. Okay, that's going to change how the plane looks, and so that works pretty well. And then you can also have a script do this procedurally within Unreal if you want to create like tons of the same plane, for example. Now, the main goal that I wanted to do with this script is for this program where I want all these planes to be in flight. So the goal was to try to remove sort of spurious things like the flight gear if possible, but keep in everything else. Okay, and so you can see that it didn't really work out for most of these because a lot of times the flight gear will be attached to the wings or attached to the main body of the plane, and so it's not possible to fix without actually going through and editing every single asset within Blender. Okay, but I didn't really feel like doing that because I wanted to just automatically have hundreds of planes, and so this is what we have. Now here's the whole script I have for assemble aircraft, and this is basically just going to be able to be called where the command will be able to change the color, the livery, and then it will be able to assign whatever is the main .ac file, because that's going to determine where everything else goes. And as you can see here, there's also this exclude portion of the thing. So this is going to be able to exclude things like landing gear if you want to do it manually. Okay, but when it came to doing this to hundreds of planes, that would take me days and days to actually go through every single aircraft and specify what I wanted. And even just picking out the actual main file that I wanted to use and apply the livery to. Okay, so to basically get around this, I created this prompt for Gemini, the LLM software, to go through and do this all for me for hundreds of planes. And it even went through and excluded like certain things that weren't planes. Okay, and then also in my game, I wanted to have these values to automatically apply to all these assets. Okay, so I had Gemini also use the web or use its own knowledge to go in and estimate the speed of these planes and their altitudes and whether they're helicopters, etc., whether they're military planes, stuff like that. Okay, but then it's also going to go through and try, it doesn't always work, but try to exclude certain things like landing gear or parachutes or like extra assets like that. Okay, and then by default, everything within, if we go to some of these planes, let's try to find a good example. A380, for example, the default is to just include everything within this model folder that's a .ac file. Okay, everything within these subfolders will be included in that .fbx, but it will be hidden. Okay, and I actually need to change that to not be hidden to actually show that to Unreal. You can just easily change that within the script, but basically all of these things will be combined into a single mesh within Blender before they get exported to Unreal. Okay, so the next thing to make this LLM idea work is we need to have the file tree of that folder, of that flight gear data folder. You can see here it actually works out to 185,000 lines of the file tree here. And if I show you just how big it is, so that's every single file. This is all the extra files. This is what we need a Gemini to actually go through. And I use Gemini because it has a token limit or context limit of 1 million tokens. And so it's able to process, this many items at a single time. Of course, it can't actually do 185,000 lines because that would be like several million tokens. Okay, so what I do, I just go like this and I just highlight 15,000 lines from within this. And then this works out to, well under 1 million tokens. And so then I paste this prompt and I paste the chunk of the file tree in there. And then it'll go through and create all of these PowerShell commands. Okay, this is like, let's see how big it is. Oops. Almost 8,000 lines of these PowerShell commands. And obviously, I can never in a million years do this by myself. And even with a large team, this would be a huge, difficult task, especially researching all these different planes, finding out what all the .ac files are and all the livery files are. It just would be impossible. Okay, but here I could just have this automatically generated 8,000 line program. And this is going to basically attempt to input all of these planes and convert them to .fbx files. Okay, and by the way, this actually runs pretty fast, at least on my computer, when you just paste this entire thing into PowerShell. So the first problem that I noticed is that within our actual folder from once we actually convert all of these into .fbx files and these little metadata files with our little information there, you'll see that there's only 414 of these planes that actually load in. And actually when they, by the time they finally get imported into this Unreal project, there's only like 375 of them. Okay. So just by the way, I also have this, I also have a script that is basically just exactly this. It loads all of these planes into an Unreal project and spaces them out just like you see here. Again, if you want to have things like moving rotors. So for example, if we go to some of these planes or some of the helicopters, probably at least half of the helicopters, they don't have their rotors included. Okay, this is probably something I could have fixed within the prompt to actually load in all of those rotor files, but this is actually what it looks like within Blender. So if we go to import, when we find our helicopter here, you can see in this model folder, it's only the base part of the aircraft that gets included there. Okay, so usually all these things are excluded by default. Again, we could change that if we wanted to. And we could have the LLM actually look through the file tree and try to find things like rotors. That actually probably wouldn't be that hard. But you can see it's in externals and then main rotor. And we can load both of these in. Oh, whoop, I forgot to load in the plane, sorry. Okay, so first we'll load in the helicopter here, and then on top of that we will import its there we go, imported the blade. Now, in terms of my project, having this static mesh of the blade there is not actually that valuable to me because really I want this entire if you really want a realistic helicopter, you'd want this entire little assembly here to be rotating all around. And then the the body of this would stay static. By the way, you can change within the script that I have in Blender to keep all these parts separate. And then you can also change within Unreal if you want to combine static meshes or not. So if you want to have, like, I don't know, things to like open doors or stuff like that within your program, then these assets are, they're great for that because they're part of a flight simulator. Okay, so that's probably enough yapping, but I'll just want to show you a few more problems with this just as we go through. And by the way, all these planes that have issues, for the purposes of my project, I'm doing like a low resolution simulation of these planes. And so I don't really care about these details, and I'm probably just going to delete the planes that have major issues. So first of all, when you initially load this in, there's actually a few of these planes that have these giant bubbles. There's probably like 2 or 3 of these, including the A10. And so I just went ahead and deleted those already. But again, like I said, this is just some .ac asset from within that A10 folder that's getting loaded in. And it's really difficult for the LLM to realize which one of those like 20 different AC files is actually going to be something random like this. Okay, so you can manually fix this if you'd like with a command to exclude certain things. But for me, I'm just going to just not use the A10. I'll just delete it later. Now, the other thing, like I said, this is I think this is only the 777 that has this problem, is that they become super tiny. But I'm actually going to go through and check to make sure there's not any other planes that became super tiny. Also, a few of these planes have these kind of panels. It's getting cold when I look over here for some reason, but they have these panels at least on one side of the plane. So I'll also go and delete those, but I'm sure you can manually fix this within Blender. Of course, we have the A380. This one is probably the most problematic. This one has wings in a separate folder, and then these the double-decker rows of seats are not getting properly loaded in. We can look inside the plane. Yeah, it just doesn't look right. I think a lot of the cockpits actually got excluded just through the prompt, by the way. But yeah, basically anything with something like this, I'm just going to delete and not worry about. Oh, was that another? There's another tiny plane here, the 757. Interesting. Okay, and then the last problem is that just a few of these are tilted on their side. That's a pretty easy fix just within Unreal, but I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm just going to delete those and and move on. And then I'll have like something like 300 of these planes that I can use in my project. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. You really don't have to go through all the hassle as far as the code. You can just download all these FBX files and then run the script in Unreal. And that's all provided on my GitHub and in the description. And so, yeah, leave it in the comments if you have any questions or if there's anything obvious that I'm overlooking that I could use to simplify this in any way. With that being said, thanks for watching and have a great day. Oh, and also, this is my second account. My main channel is sort of a space and tech, more polished, sort of longer videos. And so this is going to be my second channel where I just post kind of random stuff like this, like code projects and whatnot, or just like random stuff, from life or whatever. But yeah, if you're new, if you've only just seen this channel, definitely go check out my main channel, which is called Noise and Space, which is kind of totally different. But I think you will like it. But with that being said, guys, thanks so much for watching and have a great day.